The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Let us bow for prayer. O gracious one, we thank you for the grace you have bestowed upon us today. We thank you for life and liberty. We thank you for health and well-being. We thank you that the beat of your heart is for all of humanity. We thank you for the privilege and the responsibility of human government. We pray for our Minnesota state legislators today, that you would grant them wisdom, guidance, and compassionate hearts. We pray that their decisions would be made by your divine guidance and not for political gain. We pray for a willingness and eagerness for all to work together for the common good that is pleasing to you. We pray for righteousness, peace, and fairness to be the guiding principles of this House. We commend each and every legislator, each and every citizen, each and every inhabitant of this great state of Minnesota into your hands. For your sake and for your glory, we pray. Amen.
Members, the chaplain for today is the Reverend George Marin from Grace Christian Church in Albert Lea, Minnesota. Members, please remain standing as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal from the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 89th session, 2015, 57th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Friday, May 8th, 2015.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objections, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Comparison reports. There is a copy of this order of business at each member's desk. If there are no objections to the motion, the motions will prevail. Hearing and seeing no objections, the motion prevails and substitutions will be made. Second reading of Senate files.
Second reading, Senate file number 86.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate file 229.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate file 634.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate file 1025.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate file 1587.
Second reading. Introduction of and first reading of House files.
Introduction of first reading of House files 2321 through 2322.
The following bills have been introduced and offered for introduction this day. The clerk has given their first reading. Introduction, first reading of House files 2321 through 2322. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which the amendments and concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 303, an act relating to state government. Message is signed Joanne M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate. Erdahl moved that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House file number 303, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, that is my motion. We do have a few little differences with the Senate that we need to resolve in conference committee.
All those in favor of the Erdahl motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House file number 303. Erdahl, McNamara, Torkelson, Heinzeman, and Kahn. Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, which amendments and concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 262, an act relating to real property. Message is signed Joanne M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate. Smith moved that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House file number 262 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
The member from Osseo, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 262 is a real property bill that we passed in February unanimously. The Senate attached 1901, House File 1901, which is a bill that I'm chief authoring as well. It deals with estate tax reform that is also state bar approved. This bill deals specifically with Q-tip trusts. It's revenue neutral. It passed civil law and the tax committee without any controversy, and I ask for your support today. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the Senate amendments? There being no further discussion, pardon me, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you. Would Representative Smith yield?
He will yield. Representative Hortman.
Representative Smith, do you know if the Department of Revenue has a position on those Q-tip provisions?
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I do not know if they have a position. The State Bar Association had passed all the departments within that group, and there was no issue or controversy within the tax committee.
Thanks. Never mind.
Now, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion prevails, and the clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate. Third reading.
Third reading, House File number 262, as amended by the Senate.
Any further discussion? There being no The clerk will close the roll. There being 94 ayes and 32 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to.
Messages from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate files number 280, 542, 698, 1350, 1398, and 1854.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading of Senate file number 280, an act relating to state government. Knobloch moved that Senate file number 280 and House file number 488, now on the general register, be referred to the chief clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
First reading Senate file number 542, an act relating to health. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Higher Education, Policy, and Finance. First reading Senate file number 698, an act relating to natural resources. Torkelson moved that Senate file number 698 and House file number 390, now on the general register, be referred to the chief clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
First reading Senate file number 1350, an act relating to transportation. Atkins moved that Senate file number 1350 and House file number 1461, now on the calendar for the day, be referred to the chief clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
First reading Senate file number 1398, an act relating to retirement. The bill is being referred to the Committee on State Government Finance. First reading Senate file number 1854, an act relating to transportation. Lilly moved that Senate file number 1854 and House file number 1772, now on the calendar for the day, be referred to the chief clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. The member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Representative Zerwas, state your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with a heavy heart today that I and members of my hometown, Elk River, mourn the loss of a 16-year veteran police officer who was first hired in Elk River in 1999 by my father when my dad was still the chief, and Officer Besser served the next 16 years with unbelievable grace and dignity. His son, 27-year-old Blake, was also lost this weekend in the shooting in Otsego, and we are just heartbroken at really the loss of two just amazing people in our community. Officer Becker, like I said, was a 16-year veteran for the Elk River Police Department. Prior to that, he was a 12-year veteran in the Armed Services, active duty in the United States Air Force. He served another 8 years in the Air Reserve, where he was deployed during that time to Turkey. I've known him half my life. He always had just a big smile and was the kindest, gentlest person you'd ever want. If you had to call 911, you wanted Officer Besser to take that call because he was going to help you out. His last assignment was as a school resource officer at the Elk River High School. And they posted this condolence message, which I think does a really nice job of summing up Todd. They said, one of life's greatest pleasures is to meet people who are admirable and inspiring, and one of life's greatest cruelties is that people are sometimes taken from us too soon. They said, Officer Besser exemplifies what that's all about. The fine line balance of being a cop versus being a counselor, especially when working with troubled youth. His gift was his gentle and intuitive nature. He was a positive role model for students and will be missed. I'm going to miss my friend Todd. And Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a moment of silence.
Members, please rise as we observe a moment of silence. The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl. For what purpose do you rise?
A point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Each day in Litchfield, First District Association processes 5 million pounds of milk into whey and 300,000 pounds of cheese. It is the largest milk processor in the state of Minnesota in one location. Today is Cheese Day in the House of Representatives retiring room. I'd like to thank the dairy industry of the state of Minnesota, to FDA, and of course to my wife Karen for making this event possible.
Calendar of the day. The first bill on the calendar today is House File 2193. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2193, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to workers' compensation.
The member from Scott, Representative Albright, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House File 2193 is a bill that aims to address the rising medical costs in workers' compensation, represents a collaboration by the Department of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce, the Department of Labor and Industry, as well as the AFL-CIO. And Mr. Speaker, I believe there is amendment at the desk.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Albright moves to amend House File number 2193, and the amendment is coded A1.
Representative Albright, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, the A1 amendment establishes a standard for electronic attachments in order to ensure conformity in transferring the information for the injured worker between the clearinghouses and makes the system more friendly for payers and providers. And I would respectfully request a green vote.
Question on the and discussion on the A1 amendment. The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A1 amendment is a good amendment. It makes it simpler for hospitals and insurers and injured workers to make the flow of money for people to get their injury repaired and get back to work. So I hope we all support this amendment.
Further discussion to the A1 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Representative Albright, to your bill, as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, the workers' comp reform bill that you have before you is historic. And in a sense, to give you a little context in terms of what we're talking about today, the last time that this type of reform was accomplished was in 1993. And let me give you even a broader context in terms of what that means for a couple members of both parties. Representative Khan would have been starting her 21st year in the legislature the last time that we undertook work comp reform. Now, to put it in even greater context, Representative Christensen, he would have had a few days left before he would have entered this world. So that is how long we have worked on this, and I'd like to thank all the stakeholders, in particular the Council for Workers' Comp, for their diligent and perseverance in the matter. This could not have come about without a collaboration between all the stakeholders. So truly this is a peace in the valley piece of legislation. Members, to the points that are included in the bill, I'll just cite a few of those. Under this legislation, the maximum payments are limited to 200% of the Medicare pricing, with two main exceptions. For catastrophic cases where the costs exceed $175,000, as an example, this would consider severe burns or amputations. Hospitals would be reimbursed at 75% of the customary charges. We are adopting the MSDRG system and moving away from the usual and customary charges that have been prevalent in the past. Secondly, critical access hospitals, generally smaller rural hospitals which transfer the more serious injuries, will be reimbursed at 100% of their costs. Hospitals have some issues with regard to the timeliness of payments. That's why we've added the electronic payments function. This bill also goes to address the issue of making sure that insurers respond within 30 days of receiving an electronic bill from the hospital. The bill limits the insurer's ability to request additional documentation from the hospital regarding the bill submitted, establishes a means by which the hospital's insurers can request an audit and receive a reparation if a party was found to have been overcharged or underpaid for services. So with that, members, I would encourage a green vote on this. I would like to thank, for the record, Representative Mahoney for his collaboration on behalf of the council as well. He's been a strong advocate for this, and I'm confident in saying this, that without his assistance this could not have been accomplished. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield to any questions.
There are no further amendments at the desk, so the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2193, as amended.
Third reading. Further discussion to the bill. The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Albright was correct. This is a very long-awaited reform to the work comp system, and it does serve the interests of business, small business and large. It does serve the interests of hospitals. It does serve the interests of insurers. But primarily it serves the interests of injured working men and women. It takes the headache and the hassle that is inherent in the current system by using, and the current system uses paper for its billing system. This bill moves the worker comp system into the 21st century. So having said that, I hope we all vote to move this bill forward. And as a compliment to my counterpart on the other side of the aisle, it was fun to watch him be the hammer, and I got to come in and be the conciliatory. No, I'm just kidding. A little bit of the opposite. And it was, it's good to see this done. For those members who have been around a long time, just to give you a perspective, this was something that Steve Swigum was working on the last couple of years he was here. And it actually does help a lot of people. So with that, I will sit down and vote green when we get the opportunity.
The member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Representative Mahoney and Representative Albright for their work on this. This is truly something that they've been working on for years. I would encourage every member to vote green on this. This really is the kind of legislation that we should all aspire to, where it's a collaborative work over a number of years. I think they have both done very well on this, in addition to all the other people that have helped them Too many to name here, and if I started, I would forget some people. So the both of you get the thanks here on the floor, but we all know there were other people involved. I appreciate it. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Mahoney. Thank you, Representative Albright. Members, please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1554. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1554, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to agriculture.
The member from Polk, Representative Anderson P., to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This omnibus policy bill is the work of our Ag Policy Committee this past year. First of all, I'd like to thank some of the staff for helping on committees all year and for putting this bill together. House Research, Colby Sullivan, Fiscal Staff, Ken Savory, and Caucus Staff, Mark Nisley, my very capable CA. My committee LA Legislative Assistant Tyler Webster, GOP Research Brian Paro, and DFL Research Nancy Conley, and my Vice Chair Representative Franzen, and DFL Lead on the committee Representative Bly. Thank you for your work, and also thanks to Representative Poppy for her work both on the policy and the finance side of agriculture this year. And last of all, great pages we had this year. Barb Smith, her smile every day in the committee, and also Patrick Levine for his work as well with the Ag Policy Committee. Members, this bill has a lot of good features to it. It contains many provisions that the Department of Agriculture requested us to include in the bill, and a couple other key provisions. After many years of working and revising and compromise, we finally come up with a bill to address an agritourism situation. It's been one that has been looked at for a long time, and some folks had some concerns about it, but we've had a lot of good collaboration with the Department of Health, with the trial lawyers, also checking in with the governor's office. They seem to be okay with the changes and revisions that were made. So we think we have a good bill that gives farmers some basic liability protection when they host an event on their farms or breakfast on the farm, things like that. In terms of agritourism. So very proud of that work in the bill. Also some language pertaining to labeling clarifications, labeling plants, nursery plants, things like that for their impact on bees. Those that sell retail or to end users that may not label their plants as beneficial to pollinators if the item has been treated with a systemic insecticide. So language pertaining to that in the bill. And also Representative Franzen has a piece in the bill that pertains to seeds. That was brought to us early in the session by some folks up north. And what the language in the bill does, it exempts from seed law people that share seeds for home, education, charitable, or personal non-commercial use. And those folks that this pertains to are anxious to have that also passed and hopefully become law. I'll run down some of the sections that the Department of Ag requested to have in the bill. The first section pertains to the department's permitting process. They want to improve that process. They have some goals and such, and they want to have that goal of getting these things done within 150 days. Section 2 pertains to the Agriculture Best Management Practices loan program. It doubles the loan limits that are available in that type of program. Section 3 again pertains to bees. We passed some language last session that would allow beekeepers who suffer a loss of colonies, and that is a problem, that they would be eligible for some compensation from the state. And this would simply require those beekeepers to register with the Department of Ag in a voluntary program such as Drift Watch, things like that, so that their locations could be noted by those folks who would be spraying or doing any other types of practices. So in order to be eligible for compensation, they would have to register with the Department of Ag. Sections 4 and 5 of the counties like these programs, these sections, having to do with waste pesticide collection programs. It allows counties to band together, joint powers, things like that, and not have to have a collection site in each individual county. And it provides for collective opportunities statewide, but again, counties can go together and work together on that. We mentioned Section 6, the pesticide use requirements. That's a Hansen provision that would require that anybody selling pesticides to Minnesota residents, those Minnesota folks would have to be properly licensed in order to purchase pesticides over the internet. Section 7 through 11, these are department requests dealing with structural pest control applicators, commercial, non-commercial applicators, incident response plans, things like that. That covers up through Section 11. Section 12, again, was that pollinator-friendly plant labeling restriction. And sections 13 through 18, I should say, again, are department requests dealing with the Minnesota seed law. They pertain to things such as hybrid seed corn and things like that, the department with their seed laws. Section 19 is the Franzen bill that pertains to the seed law requirements. And Representative Franzen, I see she's on the floor, and would you care to discuss your seed requirement? And we'll get to her in just a second. Section 20, again, goes to the Department of Agriculture. It strengthens their food embargo and condemnation authority by including equipment and facilities in that, that they're available to work with in that provision. Section 21 extends the sunset of the Agricultural Growth Research Innovation Program, commonly known as AGRI. It extends that for 10 years to June of the year 2025. Sections 22 through 26 deal with the Rural Finance Authority's programs. It basically increases loan limits for a variety of loan programs, and those are in sections 22 through 26. 27, again, is a department request for grain storage, statements of such. And section 28 is the one that deals with the agritourism and the immunity from liability. Now, several states have laws such as this. Wisconsin passed a similar law last year, and it gives farmers some basic liability relief, or agritourism professionals as well. And it's an affirmative defense for farmers who have done their part, their basic part, to their duty of what they have to do. I'd like to thank a couple of folks who have worked on this provision as well. Tom Peterson, Minnesota Farmers Union, has worked for a number of years trying to get this type of law passed, and with a lot of help from him and visiting and compromise, we hope to get that done this year. Also helping in the bill were Brent Olson from Renewing the Countryside, and Doug Busselman also helped out from the Minnesota Farm Bureau. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think there's some amendments. Mr. Speaker, I should say some amendments, and I will stand for questions on the Ag Policy Bill here this afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend House File Number 1554, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A17.
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I wanted to include this amendment so that our local farmers that are dealing with the avian flu around the state of Minnesota have the ability to take advantage of the disaster relief loan program. And so we added some language in the bill to allow that to happen. And also, Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment to the amendment, if you want me to cover that now or later, Mr. Speaker.
There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 1554, the first engrossment. The amendment to the amendment is coded A26.
Representative Baker, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my amendment to the amendment, which I've also shared with this over the weekend and yet today with Representative Poppy and Representative Bly, our concern is, and again, hearing this through the Turkey Growers Association, that the loan program that I just mentioned also needs to remove a language that gives a maximum net value to the farms currently listed in the bill as $660,000 back in 2004 dollars, which currently is about $850,000 net value. That would be the value of the farm, the land, and if you make any more than that, or not if you are valued at over that amount, you would not be eligible for this recovery program. So the loan again is to repopulate your barns, to in fact improve your buildings and facilities so that they're going to be better for the future, and not allow any further small birds in, better roofs, just better overall coverage for biosecurity measures. And again, this removes the net value for avian flu specific farmers only. So this does not deal with a normal loan recovery for the dairy or the beef at this point. So specifically, this language removes the net value for the poultry industry for this specific disaster program. So with that, members, I'll stand for questions.
Discussion on the Baker amendment to the amendment. The member from Mauer, Representative Poppy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I appreciate Representative Baker bringing this amendment to the amendment and the underlying amendment forward, and I would urge a support.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, yes, to get the loan program into the shape it needs to be to effectively deal with the situation in the Turkey people, I also support this amendment. It's a good amendment.
Further discussion to the Baker amendment to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bly moves to amend the Baker amendment to House File Number 1554, the first engrossment, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A28.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Speaker. And essentially, this is language that is currently in the omnibus ag finance bill, and I want to have another opportunity to help it move forward. We don't know necessarily what will happen with negotiations, and I want to make sure that we get the money where it needs to go to help the efforts in stopping and containing this influenza. So I also have a line at the end of the amendment which doesn't allow for the duplication of spending. So it limits it to only one would go forward, and I'd like a roll call. Thank you.
A roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call on the amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
The member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under Rule 3.21-B, I would find that you would find this order out of order, or this amendment out of order, and I have advice.
State your advice, Representative Albright.
Mr. Speaker, the scope of this amendment as it would pertain to the amendment is greatly outside the scope and expands the amendment itself. And so in light of that, Rule 3.21-B would be in order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that you find the point of order not well taken. The underlying amendment deals with the avian flu crisis that we're facing. This amendment deals with it as well. And more significantly, I don't understand why the majority keeps rising to points of order when we're only trying to advance getting the money out to deal with this issue related to avian flu. There shouldn't be any reason why you're trying to hold back that. Why wouldn't we move this ahead as many places as possible so we can actually get it done? I mean, I understand it's in an omnibus bill right now, but who knows what the fate of that is going to be. Why shouldn't we move it forward as quickly as we can and as many places as we can in a bill I believe Representative Anderson is going to be able to bring to a very quick conclusion. So I would encourage you to find the point of order not well taken. Let's put this amendment on and move forward.
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice, Mr. Speaker?
State your advice.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that you will rule that this is not germane or out of order, if you will. I just want to reiterate that we are working collaboratively, Democrats and Republicans alike. I also want to say thanks again to Governor Mark Dayton, the Lieutenant Governor, the Deputy Chief of Staff, the Commissioners. Everybody is taking this very, very seriously. We do have this in the Agriculture Finance Bill. This is also, we're dealing with the Ag Policy Bill currently, Mr. Speaker. And so again, everybody is working very, very hard on this. This is covered, and we are very committed on this and will continue to be. And so, Mr. Speaker, I ask that you rule this out of order. Thank you.
Further advice. The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. Advice.
State your advice.
With all due respect to my colleagues on the floor, I would hate to see things fall apart and not be able to move forward on this very important issue. So again, as was said, I think it's important that we move forward in as many avenues as we can to make sure that this money gets to where it needs to go to make sure we contain the avian flu. So I hope that you will find this objection not well taken.
Having studied the amendment and have studied the amendment to the amendment, and considering the advice from Representatives Albright, Thiessen, Hamilton, and Bly, I rule that the point of order is well taken. On the Baker amendment, Representative Hansen, the member from Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Baker yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just trying to get some clarification here on line 1.11, the applicability of the program for restoring farmland. Could you describe to me what that would be, what that definition would allow?
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative. Specifically, I believe that we've got around the farmland is more specific around the barns and the flocks, so they can do a better job preparing for either dust-ups. They can keep it watered down at times. I think that there's minimal farmland recovery to do around the farms, like you might think of during a flood, but this is actually more around the flocks and the barns itself, Representative. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Baker, so it's sanitary practices around the buildings, control of dust, control of materials, rather than, it's not crop restoration or when it says restore farmland, your intent is you're dealing with the buildings and dealing with things related to the buildings. Is that correct, if you yield?
Representative Baker.
Mr. Speaker, yes, that is correct. It's more dealing with the biosecurity right around the barns for that purpose, yes.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Would Representative Baker yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Baker, is the language that you just added, maybe with a few small language changes, also included in Representative Hamilton's Agriculture Finance Bill?
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Thiessen, yes, it is. It's in the finance bill as well.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm glad that we're moving it in two places. I just wish we could have moved some other language in multiple places. I thought I heard Representative Hamilton argue against the inclusion of the avian flu money because it was already in the Ag Finance Bill and we didn't need to leave it. So I hope by adopting this amendment we're actually setting some precedent where we can move forward with some other good policy around the avian flu crisis as we move forward here, and not just have have only that stuck in Representative Hamilton's bill.
Further discussion to the amendment as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion prevails. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lunan moved to amend House File Number 1554, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A21.
The member from Scott, Representative Lunan, to your amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, this amendment deals with the final market for some of the products our grain farmers here in the great state of Minnesota do, and has to do with the biodiesel component and requirements in Minnesota, and the labeling that the gas stations have to have for the vehicle operators. And what it does is it eases up some of this, or actually brings it more current, that relieves the gas stations of having to switch out their signage when they change the level of biodiesel in the diesel that they're selling by changing the definition of diesel. In Minnesota, one of the issues with diesel has to do with the gel-up factor, or temperature at which it does that. And so the diesel that is burnt here in Minnesota by most vehicles is a different grade than what is done during the summer. Because we now have a minimum, a basement level of how much of that diesel has to be from the products our farmers here produce, that seems to be no longer necessary. This bill is just a first step in a couple subsequent steps we're going to do to make sure that we're protecting those auto owners so they aren't putting something in their car, however, that may be detrimental to it. I would appreciate a green vote.
Discussion to the Lunan amendment. The member from Polk, Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, this is a good amendment. I encourage members to vote green.
The member from Mauer, Representative Poppy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I would concur. This is an amendment that's necessary. All of the key players have come together and determined that this is the language that they would like, so I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Further discussion to the Lunan amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Lunan amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franzen moves to amend House File Number 1554, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A23.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franzen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this amendment does, it protects family farms and farmers against so-called equity stripping scams by amending Chapters 325N, the equity stripping law, to include family farms. A little background on equity stripping, members, for those of you who don't know. In the early 2000s, in the housing market, the phenomenon of skyrocketing home values and financially struggling homeowners created an opportunity for scrupulous operators to exploit their desperation to literally steal their homes and their equities out from under them throughout the equity stripping scam. In 2004, Governor Pawlenty's office, the Minnesota Attorney General's office, and the Minnesota Department of Commerce, with the legal aid's participation, worked on legislation that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support to address the equity stripping epidemic that had arose at that time. The statute has been amended several times to add additional protections, including in 2009 to cover loan modification scams, where a person solicits a homeowner and offers for a fee to negotiate with the bank to obtain a loan modification. While the conditions precipitating this bill no longer exist, it has been modified to address other emerging concerns and has been successful in eliminating the abuses it was designed to eliminate. While current law arguably, though not I shouldn't write down big words, would include the farmhouse, it certainly should not include the remainder of the farmland. How this bill protects family farmers against equity stripping scams. Generally, by expanding the definition of foreclosed homeowner and residents in foreclosure to include family farms as defined under Minnesota Statute 500.24 subsection 2. Specifically by offering, amongst others, the following protections. Contracts must be in writing. The farmer can cancel without penalty. Protects farmers against loan modification scams. Prevents a transfer of deed without a formal closing. If the deal fails, the farmer receives 82% of the market value of the home. The foreclosure rescuer gets 18%. Farmer has a private right of action in case of violation of the statute. The eviction can be stayed if the farmer has an equity stripping 325N claim, and the protections cannot be waived. This bill has passed in the Senate, members, and I stand for questions.
Discussion to the Franson amendment. The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm a co-author on this bill. I think it's a good bill. Farmers were originally left out of the initial bill that was bipartisan that Governor Pawlenty signed. And farming is an uncertain enterprise, and I think we need to make sure that we have protections for farmers going forward. And I would hate to see us leave them out once again. So I support this and hope members will vote for it.
Further discussion to the Franson amendment. The member from Polk, Representative Anderson P.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and thanks Representative Franson and Representative Bly for carrying this legislation. It simply extends to farm property, resident farm home property, the same protections that the residential folks have, so I would encourage a green vote as well.
Seeing no further discussion to the Franson amendment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bly moves to amend House File Number 1554, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A22.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly, to your amendment.
I'll withdraw that amendment.
Representative Bly withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Johnson C. moves to amend House File Number 1554, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A18.
The member from Nicollet, Representative Johnson C., to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment is designed to extend the life of a very important program called the Farmer Lender Mediation Program, which has helped 14,000 farmers over the last 30 years who are having some trouble with their debt. And this would extend the life of the program another 5 years to 2021. It's currently set to expire next year. I ask that we do this now, that in times of economic uncertainty on the farm, whether it be to low commodity prices or, as we all know, the crisis of the avian influenza, this is an important backstop or support for farmers, and we need to extend it now. I'm concerned that waiting another year will put us into the uncertainty of next year's session, so it's important to do it now, and I ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
There is an amendment to the amendment. The member from Polk, the clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P. moves to amend the Johnson C. amendment to House File Number 1554, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A25.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson P., to your amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to withdraw that amendment.
Representative Anderson P. withdraws his amendment. Discussion to the Representative Clark Johnson C. amendment. All those, Representative Clark, to your amendment. Excuse me, Representative Johnson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, once again, this is an important program, and especially in light of the avian flu and the situation on the countryside, I'm asking for a yes vote, and I would ask for a roll call on this amendment.
A roll call being requested, and seeing at least 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. Well, as Representative Johnson mentioned, this program is not going away this year. The program isn't due to expire until next year, And there's a couple of things that work here. One is the extension, and one is the debt ceiling, not the ceiling, but the lower limit on this program. And we had this bill up in committee. We didn't come to an agreement, so I don't think amending this on the House floor is a proper way to address just part of this. I've assured committee members that we will look at this again next year and work on both factors that are affecting this bill. I've also talked with the Ag Chair in the Senate, and he agrees that we will take this measure up next year in committee and work on both the extension and the debt floor on this bill. So members, I would encourage a red vote on this amendment.
Further discussion to the Johnson amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1554, as amended.
Further discussion to the bill. The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Anderson yield for a question?
Representative Hansen, I'm assuming Representative Anderson P.
Anderson P.
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I'm looking on page 3, line 3.14 through 3.16. And I know prior to the session beginning, there was a number of us received a letter from a Beekeepers Association, and they were expressing concern about the potential for something like this being added. And I wasn't on the policy committee. I don't know, was there any testimony from the beekeepers regarding this position?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, no, there was not any testimony on this particular language.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative Anderson P. yield for another question?
He will yield.
So, Representative Anderson, if the beekeepers who are farmers didn't want this, could you maybe give some background on where this came from and why it's there, and what the impact would be in versus current law?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Hansen, I received the same letter that I think you're referring to, and as I recall, they were talking about a apiary registration program which our bill does not require. This would be a voluntary program if they want to be eligible for compensation. And the program that we discussed was a drift watch, where it's, again, voluntary. You can put in your location GPS and let others know if you have hives near where some spraying may go on. So that's where this came from. And as I understand, this language was in the bill last year and was taken out in conference committee. So this language has been around last year, but was taken out in last year.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Anderson P. would yield for another question on a different section.
He will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson P. Continuing on the B issue and that, again, looking at last year's legislation, and I think last year's legislation, the piece that you just referenced had passed the Senate but not the House, and then there was a study looking at the apiary, and it appears that the provision that we just talked about would reduce if a farmer, if a beekeeper did not have, was not registered and they had a loss due to pesticides, then they would be ineligible to apply for compensation for that loss. I think that's what you mentioned. On the provision relating to labeling, and if you can give me a moment, I'm just looking where the labeling provision is here. We had a finance provision that I think traveled in the finance bill, but this provision, I think in the other body there's a provision deleting statute on the definition of pollinator lethal insecticide. Does this bill have any deletion of the existing statute?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, no, it does not.
Representative Hansen.
And Mr. Speaker, on the pages 7 and 8, or excuse me, 8 and 9, on the retailer end user, the systemic insecticide definition relates to being absorbed and translocated by the plant, and then it would have to have a no observed adverse effect level. What does that mean?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, I'm not an entomologist or whatever, but as I understand, there was a lot of language talked about pertaining to this, and this language is what the nursery and bee people that I talked to favored. It does seem a bit vague, I agree, but this was the language that was looked at as something they could go along with, the bee people.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I think the letter that we had before session didn't really reference changing this, so I'm not quite sure where the honey producers are in that, but I think the nursery and landscape folks wanted this. I'm not sure if there was testimony from the University of Minnesota. I know Dr. Spivak was in the building last week, but I'm not, if Mr. Speaker, if Representative Anderson would yield for one more question.
He will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson P., did the university testify on this? Was there any science from the apiary folks at the university in regard to this definition?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, not that I can recall, we have gone back and forth on a lot of bee issues, the payment by which pesticide account or nursery account, but as I recall, I don't think there was any testimony on this specific piece.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. I think the bill's a pretty good bill, Representative Anderson. These questions that I've answered are my concern. If you're going into conference, I'm a little concerned about what the other body has, and so I'm gonna be a little cautious here on the vote, just because I'm concerned about going backwards. I don't want to go backwards on pollinator protection. I think if we can get a little science involved here in in the next week of discussions, and if there's a conference, that would be helpful. But I'm just a little cautious on where we're at, and I'd like, if the honey producers are back from Texas or California from moving the bees, I think it'd be good to get their input on these before a final vote. So thanks.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just trying to clarify the very question I wanted to ask Representative Anderson. So if Representative Anderson would yield.
He will yield. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. I was just trying to get a little clarity. There was a group of people that worked on the language dealing with the seed lending and the seed sharing. And I went over with you just a few minutes ago what's in the bill and your understanding of it. And I also talked with Representative Franson. We were all part of this small group that was working with the Department of Ag to ensure that individuals, farmers, or community groups that wanted to share their seeds with each other could do that, and they would not be required to do the kind of very strict requirements that the Department of Ag had in place. And it had actually been a problem with the library, seed library in Duluth, and the seed library would be in my community and in numerous community urban farming situations. And in talking with you, my understanding from you is that the language here is what we're left with, and that your understanding is that this sharing required prior approval from the Minnesota Department of Ag. That is not what's in the bill. I want to make sure that that's not the intent. And I was trying to look at the language here in the actual statute, and it seems to me like it does what your bill does cover is interpersonal sharing of seed for home, educational, charitable, or personal non-commercial use. It doesn't talk specifically anymore about seed libraries, but I want to just get your assurance that this would cover seed libraries, and they would be exempt from the existing law as it had been interpreted, for example, in Duluth, and that the intent to exempt, again, the sharing of seeds. It says in the bill here, it says interpersonal sharing of seed for home, educational, charitable, or personal non-commercial use. That doesn't require prior approval, and non-commercial doesn't prevent community gardens and others who may actually sell some of their produce from sharing seeds. So if I can have that assurance, that would be really important. I don't know if the Senate language is different. If this is something we need to take care of in the conference committee to ensure that it really covers what I know you agreed with earlier too. But there's enough ambiguity here that I thought I better ask a question. And I tried to call Mr. Cruz at the Department of Ag and could not reach him, and so I tried to call some of the community people. Just was in the middle of that when I got called. So Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that I was not immediately attentive, but Representative Anderson, can you clarify for me, and Representative Franson, you worked with me on this. I just want to make sure that we have the same understanding.
Representative Anderson P.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Clark. You are correct. The language that I referred to earlier about MDA approval is not in the bill. In talking to Vice Chair Franzen, that was some old language, so I can assure you that there will not be any approval needed from MDA to go ahead with this. And the other point you raised, I totally can't give you 100% approval. Maybe Representative Franson could. She was working on this bill more than I was. But again, we want to make this. The seed folks were very emphatic about what they wanted here, and we really tried to give them the bill that would work for them. So it's not our intent to do anything that would go against what they wanted. So if we could ask Vice Chair Franzen to comment, I would appreciate that, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Representative Clark, absolutely. What was in what you saw and what you were wondering about regarding prior approval and the caps, that was in old language. I think it was in my first bill. And so as we go forward, if there are concerns, we can work these issues out in conference. So we can just keep that dialogue open if you're okay with that. But we certainly don't want to, the people that are interested in the seed sharing program have run into enough roadblocks, and we certainly don't want to make this issue any worse than what it is.
Further discussion to the bill. The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Anderson would yield for a question. Thank you.
Representative Bly, Representative Anderson P.
Okay.
He will yield.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Just following up on some of the questions that Representative Hanson was asking about beekeepers, I was present at the hearing where we did hear about this issue of the drift watch and having to register for that, and you mentioned that it is voluntary. A concern that I had in not hearing from the beekeepers about, how they felt about it, I mean, I guess I don't know if they were even in the state necessarily, but at any rate, the issue of how do they find out that this is, I mean, it's not mandatory for them to register, but it is mandatory for them to have registered if they want to be reimbursed for losses of their bees. How would they find out about that mandate?
Representative Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Bly, I would assume the same way they found out about possible compensation, that their trade organization would inform them of that. And just a comment to Representative Hansen, in no way is there any intent to go backward on bee language. We had other language we looked at, but did not want to go there for the purpose that you mentioned. We are not trying to go backward on what we're doing for bees and habitat and those things like that. So no intent to do that. And again, Representative Bly, to me it only seems fair that if somebody is going to get some state compensation, they should at least let people know where they are, where their hives are, so people can try to avoid any conflict of spray drift and that type of thing. So to me, they would find out from their trade organizations, things like that, that if they want to be eligible for the compensation, they should get registered.
Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Anderson. I think you answered my question. I just still have concerns since this is a pretty important issue for the beekeepers, and if they may not all look at the trade association, whatever. And I guess I hope in the future we'll make a better effort of making sure they know about it, because it could threaten their business. And I just want to be clear that we want to protect them as well. But thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, just an observation, not a question. You said you did not want to go backwards on our protection of bees. I think our consumers of bedding plants will feel very strongly that you're going backwards, because while the bee may not drop dead on the spot, that's not what happens necessarily to bees. The toxicity can build up in them. It's a neurotoxin that we're dealing with in general. And consumers, the people who buy the annual bedding plants and those kinds of things, do not want the kinds of pesticides in their soils. And that's why the language was originally written the way it was. So I think consumers under this language are going to feel misled. And as you go to conference, I think that has to be discussed. I know the nursery folks would like to put some pesticide in and say, well, it's not very much. But the consumers want no pesticides, and they feel like when they buy a plant that says this is pollinator friendly, they're getting a plant with no pesticide. So as you go, I can't support the bill because of that language, because I think we are going a huge step backwards. And I hope as you are in conference, you'll be looking at this from the consumer point of view as well as the nurseryman point of view.
Seeing no further, the member from Carleton, Representative.
Sundin.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Chair Anderson for including some of the most important language that I offered this year that'll really going to benefit the family farmers in outstate Minnesota, greater Minnesota. Okay. The RFA authority increases, we've increased the loan participation limits there, and it's going to affect the farmers in 5 different ways. The first is beginning farmer loan program will be increased, the caps on that. The second would be the loan restructuring program. The third, the seller-sponsored loan program. The fourth, Agriculture Improvement Loan Program, and number 5, the Livestock Expansion Program. This is going to ease the financial burdens to our farmers, and I appreciate the inclusion in the bill.
Again, my apologies, Representative Sundin. The member from Nicollet, Representative Johnson C.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And as we come to the close on this bill, I want to remind us that we missed an opportunity a few minutes ago. I do think that was important to do. And Representative Anderson, I deeply trust and respect you, but let's make sure we get it done in the confusion of the next year. But there are also a couple of opportunities that are taken in this bill that I want to highlight. One was the opportunity to extend the Agri program, and I've spoken about that on the floor, and the opportunity that gives to our small livestock producers, as well as to those who are interested in adding value to agricultural products through some small grants and loans. And that's an important extension, and that's a good opportunity taken. The second opportunity I want to stress is the agritourism, and you mentioned that, Representative Anderson, as a co-author on that bill, and I carried that bill last year. That was a hard bill to get through this legislature, and my congratulations for getting that through. And I don't know if Nicollet County will ever compete with Crow Wing County, but we certainly hope to someday. I think there's a lot of increased interest in food, where it comes from, and this will help promote agritourism. Thank you very much.
The member from Polk, the bill author, Representative Anderson P.
Thanks once again, Mr. Speaker and members, for your questions and your concerns about pollinators and things, and certainly those concerns we will take those into account. Again, to highlight the bill, the agritourism piece, I think you have a sheet that was passed out from the Second Harvest Heartland supporting the agritourism piece in the bill as introduced, and not a lot of changes were made in the bills that would pertain to what they would support. So that's a highlight of the bill. Again, the seed ability to transfer seeds on a small scale, and then also some of the habitat language, which some people liked and some have some concerns about. But overall, and again, Representative Sundin, thank you for authoring the piece on the RFA loan extensions and enlarging those amounts, because it takes a lot of capital to operate in today's agriculture. And again, also to Representative Baker for his piece on the loan program for our turkey producers, very important parts of this bill. So, Mr. Speaker, enough has been said, and I would encourage and ask for a green vote on our ag policy bill. Thank you very much.
Seeing no further discussion on the bill, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 102 ayes and 25 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin for the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Wednesday, May 13th, 2015, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File Numbers 1365 and 501, Senate File Number 1504, and House File Number 1257.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions on at the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing none, the motions prevail.
Bly move that the rules of the House be so far suspended that House File Number 2296 be recalled from the Committee on Agriculture and Finance, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly, to your motion.
Thank you, Speaker. As I've risen before, I would like to declare an urgency and suspend the rules to move House File 2296, which would create a standalone bill of the governor's request for avian flu. And I'd like a roll call.
A roll call being requested, and seeing at least 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the urgency. The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Bly, you know, I'm beginning to think that we don't have any faith of all the individuals that are working on this. We've had this conversation a number of times. And I'm going to reiterate one more time that the governor, I want to thank the governor for taking this very, very seriously. I want to thank the Speaker and the Majority Leader for taking this very, very seriously. The Deputy Chief of Staff, Ms. Hardy, for your leadership on this issue. Commissioner Frederickson from the Department of Ag. We had Commissioner Franz is working very, very hard on this. We have the Department of Health, and like I said before, within an hour after we called them and asked them to meet, they had 2 representatives in the office in which I occupy within an hour. They take this very, very seriously. Dr. Hartman with the Board of Animal Health and everybody that's working within the Board of Animal Health, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. The University of Minnesota, the VDL, all the individuals that are working over there, the Minnesota Poultry Testing Laboratory. Representative Baker has been out there a number of times working with and visiting with folks that have been spending countless amount of time on this issue. Mr. Olson with the Minnesota Turkey Growers. We had talked about the expert on avian influenza with the Pomeroy chair and their work. The National Guard, the USDA. We have countless people, not to mention the producers themselves. We are working extremely hard on this, extremely hard, and taking it very, very seriously. It is in the Agriculture Finance Bill. Representative Bly, we worked very closely with you as far as getting the dollars right out of the gate. You declared that an urgency, and we all said, you know what, it is. And so bipartisanly, we agreed to do that. And you know what? We sent it to the governor and got it signed into law. These dollars are set aside. We are deliberately and addressing this issue, and we're also very thoughtfully addressing this issue as well, taking into account all the people that I mentioned and then some, not to mention everybody in the chamber, are addressing this. And so please, members, we voted against this motion before, and I'm going to ask you to do it again. Let's not disrupt the wonderful, wonderful work that has taken place by all the professionals that I've outlined here. I think the nice thing about this motion is that I get the opportunity and others to stand up and thank the great people that are working on this. So please, members, vote against suspending the rules and let us do our work. Thank you.
Further discussion to the suspension. The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, Representative Hamilton, for thanking everyone again. And I recognize that we all do take this very seriously, and I think the governor is taking it very seriously, and which is why he's asked for a standalone bill, which I rise again in hopes that we will also take this very seriously and move to suspend the rules so we can get the governor the standalone bill which he has asked for. I think this is the clearest way to make sure that the money gets to where it needs to go, that we get the job done, that we support those farmers who are at risk, and we take care of containing this very critical problem that we face. So I hope that you will vote green to suspend the rules and we can move forward on this very important issue.
Further discussions to the urgency. The member from Hennepin, the Minority Leader, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would also urge members to vote yes on this. We have repeatedly heard from people affected by this crisis that what they want here is certainty, that they are losing sleep at night, and we can deliver for them today. It's certainly not unheard of for us to move bills on parallel tracks. You know, we in fact added language that's in the Ag Finance Bill to the Ag Policy Bill, the Baker Amendment, today in order to move this on separate tracks. And as everybody knows, there's not really a question here of faith in people. There's not really a question here of whether people want this to happen, whether they're working hard on it. That is all kind of beyond saying. But what we have here is a piece of legislation that's not just in an ag omnibus bill, but in an agriculture and environment omnibus bill, with all kinds of provisions that are very, very controversial, and for which a lot of work is going to be needed to get resolved. We could resolve this by tomorrow. We could take up this bill, send it over to the Senate, they could take it up tomorrow, and we'd be done with it. So there's really no reason, members, to delay. This is an instance when there actually is an urgency. There's an urgency to go ahead. And by raising this motion, it's not to call into question anybody's hard work. It's not to call into question anybody's good faith. This is just the right thing to do. We want these people that are affected by the avian flu and seriously affected by it to get the certainty that they need and deserve. You know, all we're doing is passing the very same language, or just about the same language that we've already passed in the Ag Finance Bill. Almost all of us already voted for this, and I imagine when we suspend the rules today, we'll get a unanimous vote to move this on. There is no good reason for delay. There may be one good reason for delay. I don't think it's a very good reason, but we should not delay. There is an urgency here. Let's take the vote and move forward.
Further discussion of the urgency. Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to remind the body that the last time we took up Bly's motion, Representative Bly's motion as an urgency and sent it over to the Senate, it took them 2 weeks to meet with us to get it back to us. Where are we going to be in 2 weeks, members? Please vote no.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. Announcements. The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Mr. Speaker, members, I think everybody loves a birthday, and today is our state's birthday. This day, May 11th, 1858, Minnesota became the 32nd state, and while it would be difficult for Representative McDonald and I to sing happy birthday to a state, maybe we could all just give our state a warm round of applause and the people that we all serve, and remember that we're here serving them and the state, so wish the state happy birthday.
The member from Fillmore, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The Tax Conference Committee will be meeting in the Capitol here, room 15, at a half hour after session adjourns for the day.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, members of the Transportation Conference Committee will be meeting right now in room 200.
Announcements. Representative Cornish, the member from Blue Earth.
Mr. Speaker, members of Public Safety Policy Crime Prevention Committee will be meeting in 400 South in 15 minutes after session.
Further announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Lomer yield for a question?
Representative Thiessen, it appears that Representative Lomer is not on the floor right now.
Okay. Who else is an assistant majority leader over there? What? Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Pardon me? Parliamentary inquiry, Representative Thiessen.
Can you let me know who else is an assistant majority leader?
We have a number of assistant majority leaders.
Would Representative Baker yield for a question?
Representative Baker will yield to a question.
Thank you. I'm looking for an assistant majority leader because I see that Representative Knobloch and Representative Pepin are excused. So I was just wanted to get an update on where things were with regard to negotiations, and in particular whether there's been any discussion of an overall budget target. I know Representative Lomer today in the paper was expressing a lot of concern about the overall spending in the state legislature going too high. So I just wondered if you had any updates on where those negotiations are.
Representative Thiessen, you are still asking Representative Baker to yield? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Thiessen. As far as I know, they are currently in negotiations as we speak.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. If he'd yield, well, maybe if Representative Sanders would yield.
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Sanders, really kind of the same question, but maybe we could get some more details for the body about kind of where negotiations are, if any targets have been reached or agreed upon, and if we know that, if we know what the overall spending target is going to be for the budgets that we're going to be passing. I know that there's a big gap and a lot of concern that Representative Lomer pointed out earlier today in the paper.
The member from Anoka, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Thiessen. It's my understanding in the last that I had spoke with the Speaker and the Majority Leader, I believe that there was a breakfast at the Governor's residence this morning. They're currently addressing those issues right now in negotiations. Conference committees will be meeting, and we're continuing to work on those as of now. I don't believe that there have been global target agreements, but I know that everyone is earnestly working on those.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Would Representative Krisha yield?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Krisha, just wanted to know what kind of progress we were making on the K or the E12 Education Conference Committee, and whether you've heard about getting a target yet.
The member from Morrison, Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Thiessen, for the question. We are not meeting today. I believe we are going to possibly meet tomorrow. We're still waiting for the global targets. I see that the governor has come out and said he's now at 2% without a way to pay for it, so it looks like we still have some differences to figure out.
Representative.
It'd be awful if we actually got to 2% and 2% on the formula. I know Minnesotans wouldn't really support that, Representative Krisha. The mic's on. I know that 2% would be awful for the state of Minnesota, and so I hope that you can find your way to get there and find the money to get there, which I know would require eliminating some of the corporate tax cuts that you all proposed. But thank you for the answer to the question. Would Representative Dean yield for a question?
He will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dean, I'm just wondering if there's any update on the Health and Human Services target or whether there's any conference committees planned for today or tomorrow on that bill.
The member from Washington, Representative Dean M.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minority Leader, we are continuing to work on that. We were working on it yesterday, and hopefully we'll have an update soon.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess, oh, there we go. The only other thing is I think we're going to be meeting in our caucus in 200 tomorrow after we recess from session, whenever that, I think it's, well, whenever that's going to happen.
Further announcements, the member from Dakota, Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move when the House adjourn today, it adjourn until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th.
2015.
Representative McNamara moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2015. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The motion. Representative McNamara.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative McNamara moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. We are adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2015.